I am a parent of a child with a disability, and I do my work because I have a child with a disability, and I think about the planning part of it. We have our plan set, and ABLE is part of that. And when I started talking to the lawyers, no one's talking about ABLE, so I called my friend Doug Jackson from the state of Ohio to come here and talk about the stable account, which is what we have here in Oklahoma. You're going to get into that, so I don't have to explain it. But I'm so happy that you guys showed up, and I am available for questions, if you have any questions as well, to answer those and be a resource for your families who have special needs trusts. So, welcome, Beth.
Thanks, Ellyn.
Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. I always like to believe that if this wasn't a CLE, that you would still be here. But I'm really happy that you're also getting CLEs for this. I do appreciate the time that it takes to continue learning and to make sure that you're aware that this exists. So I'm going to be talking about what this is that exists, and that's the Oklahoma Stable Program. That's our focus for today. But we're going to be looking at it, I try to tailor every bit of it to the audience that we're speaking to. So I have the good fortune of speaking to many different audiences. So sometimes I'm speaking to students with disabilities, maybe looking at transition age and what job are they going to have, what are they going to do with their money. I talk to adults with disabilities. I talk at special needs trust conferences across the nation, primarily with estate planners and attorneys who are working in that field. I talk with medical professionals. I talk with parents. So I'm really going to try to focus it today so that it's valuable for you. But you'll probably hear a little bit of all of that as well, because really it's about the lives of people with disabilities and how this impacts their life. And so you get to be a part of that by what you're providing to that person or that family. And we'll look at it through that legal lens and make that appropriate for the CLE. But we'll make it conversational as well. Now, there's a lot of times where somebody will have a question and I'll be like, thank you, that's the next slide. And they just raise their hand just a little bit too early, and we're going to get to that. I'm okay with that, I'll tell you that. But sometimes it's because you have, maybe a family that you're serving as a client. You're like, what about this? And those personal examples are great because this is a tool for people with disabilities, and it fits into their lives. And every life is unique, every life is different. Even though there's a lot of similarities on, yes, they have a financial need, and what are they going to do with their finances? And there's kind of an overarching theme, but it's like, well, this person's situation is this. If we want to use that as an example, that's fine. And then also afterwards, I'll be able to stick around for a little while and answer any questions that you may have too. So again, feel free to raise a hand. Today it is being recorded, so I appreciate that it's actually going to be used after we leave also. But I'll be looking over here to the video recorder sometimes as well. But we'll still take those questions because they're applicable regardless. So let me talk a little bit about the word stable and able, because you're going to hear me interchange those words. So I want to start with just what is able. Able is achieving a better life experience. That was the federal legislation that was passed in December of 2014. So we're now on 5 years ago when ABLE legislation was passed. And ABLE legislation was supported with bipartisan support, passed with almost unanimously. Just what you don't see in today's political culture, this was one piece where you could actually, it doesn't matter who I'm talking to, Republican, Democrat, I can talk to anybody and they're like, this is good. And that's a great place to be as a public presenter. I'm not divisive in any way. Isn't that fun? But in 2014, this legislation passed because of advocacy by people and families with disabilities who said, we've got to make a change because people with disabilities are kept poor. They're kept impoverished because of the system. Because public benefits don't allow the person to have money. If they need the support of that benefit, they have to get rid of their money. They have to do something with it. And we saw the ways that people did things to hide their money. Now I'm going to tell you, I work for a state treasurer's office, but my background is serving people with disabilities. So I was involved with helping families maintain their public benefits, their eligibility. I'm going to teach you a little bit of sign language. I know it's lunchtime, some of you still have pizza in hand, but I'm going to teach you a sign that I learned 20 years ago. So I want you to put both hands up in the air. I want you to take your right hand and twist it back. That's, I want to ride your motorcycle. Okay? I was serving an individual, his name was Larry. So I worked in the residential side of things. I was working in Larry's home with Larry, and I would show up to work on my motorcycle. And Larry would come out of his house, and that's the sign he would give me. He wanted to go for a ride on my motorcycle. Well, being the caregiver that I was, I made sure that everything was in place to make sure that Larry's ride was approved by his guardian, that it was safe. We had a helmet for Larry, and Larry went on motorcycle rides with me, which was a lot of fun. So I started my career serving people directly with disabilities. Thought it was going to be short term, and 21 years later, I'm still involved with people with disabilities. But I tell you that because Larry and I would go for motorcycle rides, and we would go places and spend his money. So we would show up at like a furniture store and buy Larry furniture, and then they look outside and they'd be like, well, how are you going to get that home? You came on a motorcycle. I said, oh, don't worry, Larry has money. We're going to pay for delivery because he needs to spend down this money. So you've heard the word spend down? Yeah, we were doing that so that Larry could maintain his public benefits, because it was more important for him to have Medicaid than it was for him to have resources, have money in his name. So we'd go out and buy things, which was a ridiculous way to manage Larry's money, but the public benefits were more important. So Larry spent it down. Another way that people would deal with money is they hide it. Again, I work for a state treasurer's office. I shouldn't say that I know that people hide their money, but I also work with families with disabilities, and I know that one of the ways to make sure that their child receives public benefits is to maybe put the child's money in the mom and dad's account, because mom and dad are going to use it on the child, right? So they've justified it for themselves, but it's not the appropriate way of managing the funds because it's the child's funds. Now it's hidden in somebody else's account. So you've got hiding money, you've got spending down money, neither way are right. But advocacy allowed this federal legislation to be put into place that said, we're going to let people with disabilities save money and keep their public benefits. So Oklahoma partnered with a state program that already existed, and that was the Ohio Stable Account Program. So Ohio was the first program in America for ABLE accounts. So very proud of, as an Ohioan myself, very proud to have that role in the nation as the first ABLE program in America. But what we knew was, in order to be sustainable, we had to partner and make it bigger than an Ohio plan. So we made it a national plan. We now serve people in all 50 states. We also serve people in Puerto Rico, Washington, D.C., and military serving abroad. But we went one step further. We said, let's partner with other states that don't have an ABLE program. And Oklahoma reached out and said, we would like that partnership. So Tim Ellyn is here from the Oklahoma State Treasurer's Office. Tim is the local contact, so Tim and I work closely together. And Oklahoma received an ABLE program in state, so be proud of Oklahoma, at $0. So Ohio spent millions to get it up and going, and Oklahoma spent $0. So you said, well, why would you do that, Ohio? Why would you give it to Oklahoma? Because everybody that participates in the program participates together, and it creates an economy of scale for us. And so what that really does is creates an economy of scale and lower fees for the beneficiaries who are taking advantage of this account. Because the more people that participate, the more the fees can be spread out and cover the cost of the program. So Oklahoma benefits from that. All of the partner states benefit from that. Every person in the nation who's using stable account benefits from that. So when we talk about this today, we are talking about Oklahoma Stable. This is the Oklahoma plan with a local administration out of the state treasurer's office, locally branded, locally overseen, but it's tied to the nation's largest ABLE program. So we're very proud of that. We'll talk about the features that make it the largest plan. It's not just the model that we have with partnership, but it's the features itself. And we'll spend today just going through each of those features. So continuing, what is ABLE? It allows people to save money and not have that money affect their public benefits. Now, when we say public benefits, that is all public benefits. But the two that people are most concerned about are SSI and Medicaid, because those are usually the two most impactful on their lives. SSI, Supplemental Security Income, administered out of the Social Security Office, and then Medicaid, which provides a whole slew of services, everything from medical and prescription to homemaker personal care services, or what's called home and community-based waiver services, so that an individual gets the supports that they need. So I have a friend, his name is Michael. Michael has CP. Michael is in a power wheelchair. Michael works for the city that we live in. So I live in the city of Troy, Ohio. He's a public employee in the city of Troy. But Michael uses Medicaid services for a provider to come in and assist him out of his bed. He can't do that independently. But with a provider, they can assist him. through his morning routine of hygiene and getting dressed and into his power chair. Once he is in his power chair, watch out, because Michael is phenomenal at advocacy. He's phenomenal as a public servant. He's just a great person in our community. He sits on our Board of Education. He sits on many volunteer boards. Michael could do none of that if he didn't get out of bed in the morning. So to him, Medicaid is a necessity. But if he's working, he's going to earn money and he's going to have to do something with that money, right? He has a stable account program where he puts that money to save it so that he can maintain his Medicaid. So that's very important to understand. So one of the distinctions I want to make right now is that it is for saving money. It's an asset protection. Some public benefits look at both assets and income, right? So there's two pieces to it. This is the asset piece. There's not an income protection. But what most people say is, well, then you didn't fix the problem. What I want to address is that if you're earning money and your public benefits decrease and eventually go away, that's not a bad thing. That's called normal. Right? So for a person with a disability to work off of the public benefit system, that is the best problem I can create for that person. Because that is the goal that they should be working towards. Just like you and I are not working towards the goal of being on public benefits, supplemental security income. A person without a disability doesn't set that as a goal. A person with a disability would likely want to be financially independent. And this allows them to do it so that if their earned income is going up and their unearned income or SSI is going down, that's okay. But the Medicaid piece is a necessity. So there are some tolerances there on how much they can have, how much they can earn on Medicaid also, but a lot of those are more variable. And so for Michael, he still has Medicaid even with the job, but he's able to save his money and use it for the future. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of those benefits as we go through the day also. So what is ABLE account? What is it like? How can I describe it? It has this hybrid functionality that it's kind of like a college savings account, kind of like a checking account, kind of like special needs trust. We're going to talk about how it's like those, but it is its own thing. So the 529 college savings account, you use it to save money and invest it for the future so that your money is working for you. You can grow it in there. An ABLE account, you can do that too. We have investments built in, and we'll talk about those investments. The difference is that an ABLE account can start being used immediately. It's transactional, so it's like a checking account. You don't have to wait 18 years down the road like you do for a college account. If you got it when you're first born, you know, you go to college 18 years, you're not going to use it until you go to college. An ABLE account, like a checking account, can be used immediately. It's transactional. You can spend out of it as needed. But it's also like a special needs trust. Now, I'm going to make an assumption, but please confirm this for me. Are you familiar with special needs trusts? Okay, so protected resource, special needs trusts aren't counted towards that resource limitation. So the resource limitation is $2,000. A person with a disability on public benefits can't have more than $2,000 unless it's protected in some way. Special needs trust is one way of protecting it, but there's a lot of differences between a special needs trust and an ABLE account, and again, we'll be spending time on what are the similarities and what are the differences. So in Oklahoma, it's called Oklahoma Stable. It's administered by the state treasurer, Randy McDaniel, and it was launched just last year, May 31st, 2018, so just over a year old. So the biggest thing in Oklahoma right now is that people don't know that it exists. That is the biggest barrier to its use. And why don't they know it exists? Because it takes a lot of outreach, number one, but number two, it takes trust. And when you say trust in government program, those don't always go together. So tell a person with a disability, oh, trust us, your money's safe in here, and then see what the reaction is, right? But because people are using it, we now have testimonials, not just from across the nation, but right here in Oklahoma, where they're like, I'm using it, and I have my public benefits. It's working for me. And so as that continues to grow, that's going to have a lot of power to it, because you're going to see more and more people with testimonials, and the snowball effect will be able to take place, where they then gain trust, not because Jackson came from Ohio and said, hey, trust me, but because their neighbor is using it and their public benefits are okay. So now you can save more than $2,000. That is a huge change. So imagine your life if you couldn't save more than $2,000. I mean, you couldn't work towards life goals. You couldn't save enough money to go on vacation. You couldn't put a down payment down on a house. You couldn't do these things. Oklahoma has a great story of a couple that bought a house because they had an Oklahoma stable account. Because they were able to put money in there and use that as a deposit. They would have never been able to put more than $2,000 down on a house if they didn't have that account. So they used it to buy a house. Pretty awesome. And keep all of your benefits. So this really is a game changer. Changes the life of a person with a disability. Changes how they look at finances. So you can imagine the mind shift. If you've been told your whole life, you can't have money, you can't have money, you can't have money, and now you're being told you can. We used to have a flyer and it said the rules have changed. We loved it because we're like, that's great. You can now have money. The rules have changed. What we learned was people didn't like rule changes because they were usually negative rule changes. And so when they saw that phrase, they were like, that's not good. Rules changed. We took that tagline off. We stopped using it. So the account is owned by the person with a disability. We're going to talk about what makes a person eligible, but it's owned by the person with a disability. It doesn't matter if the person is a minor or an adult. It's the person with a disability who owns the account. Now, there are people that can manage the account for them, and we're going to talk about that. So don't be concerned. Well, I have a child. Does that mean that they can't have it until they're an adult? No, they can have it right away. The parent could be over it, and again, we'll talk about that. It allows them to go towards that financial independence, especially with the ability to invest and make their money work for them. So I used to be a case manager as part of my career over the last 21 years. I did the case management. So we talked about every part of that person's life. We talked about, what they're going to do for work, how is their health, where are they going to live, what do they do with their friends and recreation. Talked about all of that. The one question I never asked was, how are your investments? I would love to go back to being a case manager just to add that question, all the list of questions that you ask, and say, how are your investments? Wouldn't that be a cool question to ask to somebody who's never had that capability, and now because of Stable, they can actually track what their money's doing for them? That's a really cool question. And then tax benefits, there are some different tax benefits. Some states currently have an in-state tax deduction. Oklahoma doesn't yet. We have high hopes that maybe sometime in the future, Oklahoma will have a state tax deduction for contributions going in. But there are other tax benefits. One is that as the investments are growing, there's no taxes on those investments, ever. While it's in the account, when the money's taken out of the account, it is tax-free money. That's tremendous. That's an incentive to use it. The other is called the Savers Tax Credit. So if the person with a disability is working, they can actually take a federal tax credit of $2,000 if they're making contributions into their ABLE account. So pretty good tax savings there. Well, let's talk about eligibility. So eligibility, this isn't for everybody. This is for people with disabilities. And that the onset of the disability has to occur prior to the age of 26. But please do not let that confuse you. That doesn't mean that you have to enroll before the age of 26. We have an individual in his mid-90s who's using a stable account. That's pretty awesome. His disability was before the age of 26. He's lived his whole life with the disability, and he wanted to take advantage of the tax-free growth. He's using it for passing this on later in life, but he's taking advantage of the tax-free growth. Then any one of the following criteria have to be met. That is eligible to receive SSI or SSDI. It doesn't mean that you have to be receiving it, just eligible to receive. Or, see, these are or statements, they're not and statements. So the second one could be any condition listed on the Social Security Administration's list of compassionate allowances conditions. So that list is very broad. Don't just think about developmental disabilities. Sometimes you start talking about Oklahoma Stable and people think like autism or Down syndrome. You just kind of get the classic picture of developmental disabilities. We're talking about rare disorders, we're talking about medical conditions, we're talking about mental health conditions, we're talking about wounded warriors if the disability happened prior to the age of 26. Now there is advocacy on a national level to increase that age. There's currently a bill on Capitol Hill. We don't know if it will pass yet or not, but it's to increase it from age 26 to the age 46. Why is there an age? Because they tried to contain the lost taxes that they were going to have. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you, because some people are, why 26? Because they scored it in the federal process, you score it, you make it tolerable, and that's where they go. So it doesn't tie to anything else other than the cost of doing it.
So in order to determine whether someone was disabled before 26, what Is there a criteria to be looked at?
So, that's the next slide. Let me hit perfect. So self-certification is the third way. Self-certification simply means that you have a medical professional that says something like, it does not have to be these exact words, that the individual has a marked and severe functional limitation. Now that is the phrase that Social Security uses to define disability. So that's the same phrase that's used here, but it's something that points towards that. So we all the time have parents that say, well, my medical documentation doesn't say, quote, marked and severe functional limitation, but it says that, you know, there's this delay and that there's this medical condition, and then that's still the same thing. It's pointing towards that marked and severe functional limitation. That the condition has lasted or is expected to last at least a year. So we're talking about long-term disabilities. We're not talking about somebody who broke their leg and they're off work for 6 months. And then for us, during the enrollment process, and this still goes to answering your question, we don't require that documentation to be submitted. We use what's called a self-attesting process. So during the enrollment, they're attesting that they have this condition that they're reporting, this disability, and that they have documentation that could be produced if needed. Why do we do that? Because we believe, as a program that we designed, that we wanted to reduce as many barriers as possible. One of the barriers was producing documentation. What we also believe is that families that produce documentation doesn't mean that they're any more honest or any less dishonest than somebody who can produce documentation. If you're going to try to get away with using a program and you don't qualify for it, you're going to try it to break the rules any way that you can. So we know that somebody may use this program and they may not qualify. It'll catch up with them eventually, and we'll talk about the auditing of this later on. It'll catch up with them eventually, and there's penalties for that. But we wanted to make it a program that people could enroll in easily. We wanted to make it a program where people with disabilities could manage it themselves, and this has allowed us to do that. And what we're finding is people are using it for the right reasons. I mean, we talk to so many of the people, not every person that we serve that we talk to, but we talk to so many of the people who are using this, and we know that they are. Usually, if they call our customer service, it's pretty easy to tell, you know, what the circumstance is that they describe to us fits that qualification. So we're very comfortable with our self-attesting process. So enrollment is done online. So Oklahoma Stable has its own website. It's on our flyers. It'll be at the end of the presentation as well. You can Google Oklahoma Stable. It's going to come up with its own website. And then there's this really convenient button that just says open an account. And that button is in several different places. That allows you to start it. It's quick and it's easy, so about 20 minutes of what it takes to fill out the information that's on there. Now, I'll oftentimes ask audiences, especially when I have parents in the audience and they have a child with a disability, I'll say, has anybody opened up a Stable account? Because I know that if they have, their experience is going to be a positive experience. So I'll ask them some questions, unsolicited response back to me. How easy was it? When we get the response, it was very easy. So Ellyn, how easy was it?
9 minutes.
9 minutes is what it took her. Now that sounds like a record to beat. So we say quick and easy, and I use the story. So Darcy is an individual with CP. She types with one finger on each hand. We learned about Darcy because Darcy video recorded herself enrolling in her Stable account. She talked through the process of what she was doing, and then she posted the video to YouTube. It's still there. You can look for Darcy's Stable account and you can find the video. It took Darcy 10 minutes and 18 seconds to set up her own account, and that was with her introduction and her celebrating that she had her account at the end of the video. We didn't ask Darcy to do that. She did that on her own, which we thought was really cool. So we now know Darcy. We reached out to her. But I told that story to a group of individuals with disabilities, and one of the individuals, an adult, she raised her hand and she said, Doug, I beat that record. And I'm like, well, it's not a contest. I don't know how she can do it. So Ellyn beat that record also.
But as a parent, it's the first time that I couldn't believe how short it was. Because normally we're used to filling out volumes of paperwork. And so it was, when I tell people 9 minutes, the other parents don't believe it when they do it.
Right.
The easiest process ever in a disability law.
So this adult with a disability, she raises her hand, and she said that she beat this time of Darcy's of 10 minutes and 18 seconds. And I said, how long did it take? She said, about 2 or 3 minutes. I said, well, I'm afraid to tell people that story because now we're going to try to beat that as if this is becoming this competition. But I said, how did you do it so fast? She said, I did it on my smartphone, and it has the autofill feature. So I just hit next, and it filled in her name, address, telephone number. It filled in all of those things, and she only had a few other fields to fill in herself about her disability. And then she was done. So I thought it was a really cool story on how quick and how easy it is. There's a $50 minimum opening deposit. That is not a fee, just creates a balance in the account. So financial accounts are there for money to be in the account. You have up to 90 days to fund it, so you don't even have to do it immediately. If at the end of 90 days you still haven't funded it, the account goes dormant, which just means that you have to re-log in for it to become live. You may have to call customer service depending on the amount of time and say, hey, I'd like to start this back up. But it's that easy. You don't have to completely re-enroll it. You can get it going again. So in Darcy's case, Darcy did it herself. And the other individual on her smartphone, she had a disability of her own. She did it herself. The case that Ellyn described, Ellyn, as a parent, she did it for her child. So who can enroll in the account or manage the enrollment? Who can manage the account? The individual with a disability can, and 1/3 of our accounts are managed by the individual with a disability, which I celebrate because I see that as people being very independent and very responsible in their lives. But I also know that disabilities range in the ability to do things on their own, and that some people with disabilities may not be able to do it themselves. So if they can't do it by themselves, an authorized legal representative can do it for them. An authorized legal representative is a parent, a guardian, or a power of attorney. So that is the federal legislation that allows that. We didn't make up that rule, we're just following the federal guidelines. Parent, guardian, or power of attorney. So parent would be the parent of a minor child, because once they hit the age of majority, 18, then they become their own guardian unless determined otherwise. A guardian would be a guardian appointed by the courts. It would have to be a guardian with the authority to manage finances. So different states do it different ways with conservatorship versus guardian of person. Some are both, have full guardianship over everything. Others have it over the person and or the finances in separate cases. So you have to have the ability as the guardian to manage finances. And in the power of attorney form, we actually have on the Oklahoma Stable website a resource link, and we have a limited power of attorney form there. It is just for the Oklahoma Stable program. It's not the broad financial ability over every other financial account. It's to say, I want this person to manage my Oklahoma Stable account. And that's all it's for. Now, if they have a power of attorney for other financial things, that would be suitable as well. But that's the power of attorney with the ability to manage finances. So now that you have an account, how do you fund the account? How do you get money into it? Two different ways can happen. The first one is an electronic funds transfer. That's taking an existing account, and it can be any account, and it can be multiple accounts. So it could be the child with a disability that has their own account, it could be mom and dad's account. You can pull money out of that account and place it in the stable by just using the account routing. So it's just like your bill paying, your online banking today. It's using the same system to transfer funds into the stable account. That easy. The second way is to mail a check in. So we have many families that still use checks for payment. That's fine. We have many special needs trusts that still do payments through check. That's fine. You can do a payment through a check, and when you choose that, it comes up with an address and gives you some instructions. So on the check, you're going to have the individual's name, their account number, it tells you where to mail it to, and then it's deposited into their account. So both ways work to get money into the account. Now, there's a few other ways, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute as well. But let's first talk about how much you can put in. So I'm going to use the word limit, but I'm going to use the word limit very cautiously, very sparingly, because keep in mind, people with disabilities can never save more than $2,000. Now they're able to put up to $15,000 a year in every year, year after year, and more if they're working. So we're going to look at if they're not employed, if they're employed, and then the lifetime limit. So if they're not employed, the $15,000 a year is from all sources. That's combined. So if mom and dad are putting money in, the person with a disability is putting money in, grandma and grandpa are putting money in, all that goes towards the $15,000 contribution. If the account gets to the $15,000 in one calendar year, so it's January through December, the system automatically rejects any contribution above that. If one contribution could accept part of the contribution, but then the rest would go over $15,000, we contact the person who's trying to make that transfer, and we say, how would you like to do this? Here's how much can go in. you want us to send the rest back? Do you want to redo the check? We work with you on that. If they're employed, they could put the $15,000 in, we'll call that one bucket, and then they have a second bucket available to them, and that's for earned wages up to the federal poverty line. So it's the federal poverty line of the previous year. So right now in 2019, we have to operate off of 2018's federal poverty line, $12,140. We already know that changes for next year, so in just a few days, that's going to be an outdated number, and there'll be more in 2020. But it's the federal poverty line. So it's a moving target. So if you leave and you say, well, I thought it was $12,140, and I forget what it's going up to, $12,400 or something for next year. You're still right. It was just that it changed and now it's been updated. But up to the federal poverty line. So that's an incentive to work. That was a changed piece of legislation that happened under the next presidential administration that said we're going to do more with ABLE, and they allowed what's called ABLE to work. So people with disabilities an incentive to be able to save more if they're working, and they can save earned wages. So earned wages could go into the $15,000 pot. That's okay because everything can go in there. But in the earned wages pot, only earned wages can go in there. So it's that, again, incentive to work and save. With a lifetime balance amount that equals, now this is Ohio, but Oklahoma gets to use the same number because we're administrating the program. Everybody in the nation that's using a stable account program gets to use this number. $468,000 could be saved. Now remember, $2,000 was the resource limit before. With stable, you can now have $468,000. So some people say, I can only save, that's my limit. I'm like, when you get there, let me know. But then we'll talk about it, right? This isn't going to limit too many people. You know, I hope I'm retired by the time somebody gets to this, and then they can take me out to eat, because then it wouldn't be an ethical issue anymore. They can take me out to eat. I use the word limit, but when you look at that, that's a completely different lifestyle from only being able to save $2,000. Now, there's another way to get money into it, and it's called e-gifting. So have you ever heard of GoFundMe? Right, so that's social crowdfunding is what they call it. People giving money for a reason. When we created this, we built GoFundMe, our own version of it, right into the stable account program. And I thought, well, what person with a disability is going to ask for funds? Like, isn't that a little bit weird? Who's going to say, hey, will you give money into my stable account? But then the usefulness of it was this. Think about high school graduation. What's the #1 gift for a high school graduation? Money, right? Because you're trying to prepare that person financially for the next step of their life. A person with a disability would have said, don't give me money. Because if you do, I have to report it. And I'm not going to be eligible for my public benefit. So that's the worst gift that you can give me. Now, because of e-gifting, they can send out an email to all their friends and family and say, I'm graduating. If you'd like to consider a financial gift, click here. Or birthday, or Christmas. Or this is my favorite story of the usefulness of it. We had an individual who uses hearing aids, and he was going to get a new set of hearing aids. Very nice hearing aids. I mean, the app on the smartphone to control them, his quality of life was going to improve significantly with these newer hearing aids. The hearing aids were going to cost him $4,000 after Medicare paid for their portion. So that was a $4,000 out-of-pocket expense. He could not have saved that without Stable, because the amount of savings would have been over $2,000. So we opened up a Stable account, started saving for his hearing aids, then sent out an e-gift message to his friends and family and said, if you'd like to help me purchase my hearing aids, click here. He saved $4,000 in under a month because people that wanted to support him were able to click there and give towards his hearing aids. That was a really cool way for him to be able to be supported by people who love him and meet his goal to purchase what he needed for his quality of life. So great usefulness on that. It also tracks in, it tells that individual who's giving, how much was given. It allows you to write a thank you note right back to the giver, to the contributor. Now, my parents would still make me get out pen and paper, even as an adult child. They would still say, yeah, I'm expecting that handwritten note to come to me, because that handwritten thank you note was so valuable. You can still do that, trust me. But we built in today's technology. You can send a thank you note right through the e-gifting feature. So let's talk a little bit about investments then. Because I said that you now have the ability to have your money work for you. So some people said, well, I don't know about investments. And I say, that's a great problem that we created for you, right? Now you have the opportunity to know about investments. and they have to learn about investments, or they have to seek help about investments. So Ellyn mentioned that, being with Mass Mutual, that people are now starting to come to her with an ABLE account going, well, I can invest, what do I do? And so they're seeking some professional help to guide them on what to do with investments, because maybe they don't know themselves what to do. That's a great problem. But there are 4 different Vanguard mutual fund options built into this. That's the investment part of it. Vanguard mutual funds, very well known and established investment tool, very low cost investment tool. So we'll talk about the cost of it as well. It's institutional class shares, it's very low cost. So first of all, there's the bank safe option. There's 3 different screens. I'm just going to walk over here. The bank safe option at the very bottom is the savings account option. It's just like a savings account in the sense that it's FDIC insured, right? So your money is protected. It's not going to go up and down with the stock market because it's the savings option, but it's not going to grow like an investment does either. So it's going to grow. It does earn interest just like a savings account. So you're going to earn about 4 pennies every 10 years. You're not going to get wealthy off the investment in a bank safe option. But the other options being Vanguard mutual funds allow you to choose from the conservative level up to a very aggressive level. Now, we don't have anything other than the growth, which is 80% stock, 20% bond. It's the most aggressive that we go with in here. That was just a risk tolerance choice on our part. But that is still a very good return on investment. Now, past performance does not predict future performance, right? We've been operating for 3.5 years. And the market over the last 3.5 years has been a good market for that fund. It's been a good market for all of the funds. I got very nervous when I found that people were putting 100% of their money into the growth option. I'm like, do they know what they're doing? Are they just choosing it as it's go big or go home? Right? So they don't know investments and they're just going to try to get all that they can out of it. So we started asking questions to people who were doing that. What we found out was families who knew that their child wasn't going to need this money for 20 or 30 years down the road. One family told us, we're going to buy a house for our child with a disability so they can move out of ours and have their own house. We don't want them living in subsidized housing as an adult. So we're going to buy them their own house. We're going to use the stable account to invest money in it. We know that they aren't going to move out for 20 or 30 years down the road. So we're going to put it in the most aggressive investment option. As they get older, we'll adjust it down because it's coming closer to time. We might even put it in bank safe when it comes time to purchase. And they can do that. They can adjust this. They can use all 5 of those options if they want. So if you look at the second column, the middle column, it shows somebody who divided it equally between all 5 options. If you look at the right-hand column, they chose to spread it out a little differently. As long as it equals a total allocation of 100%, you can put it into any one of those or using all of those options the way that you choose. You can reallocate that twice a year, and any new contributions going into it, you can direct where you want to go. So let's say you've already reallocated, but you want your next contribution into it to go all into one area. You can actually direct that new contribution all into that fund. So there's that flexibility built into it.
Is
Good.
there a prospectus on what those funds are and what the underlying holdings are and those kinds of things?
So because they're Vanguard mutual funds, we have a link on the website that you can click to go to see past performance, to see what they're invested in. It gives all of the Vanguard information on each one of those funds. So the answer would be yes. These are not tailored funds for us. These are typical Vanguard mutual funds.
I was just thinking mathematically to spread it out on that far right schedule like you showed, mathematically it would be better just to put 100% in the moderate growth type portfolio because the numbers work out about the same.
And we're not going to argue investment strategies.
Okay. But
I would agree, but some people like to do it the way that they like to do it. So the option is there, and that's what we're trying to show is that you can divide it out to whatever way you want to divide it.
Okay, so then the next, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize, but the underlying question then is there a component to the program that tries to do at least some even superficial education about what it means to invest and provide some level of financial literacy, if you will.
Yeah, we have some links to the Vanguard, like why use this fund, what is this fund good for, long-term strategy, short-term strategy, some of those things. What I will say is we are not providing investment advice. We can't. For people who need investment advice, I'm really happy that we've created that problem because they have money and they have to seek this help. So I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as a normal thing. So they might have to go out and get additional information, get additional assistance. If they don't know what they're doing with it, that's okay.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah. So now money is in the account. We're going to talk about what it can be used for. And some people are like, oh, this is the catch, right? Like you can only use it for specific things. So it can be used on anything that is a qualified disability expense. QDE, qualified disability expense. But I'm happy to report that a qualified disability expense is about any expense in a person's life. Because here's the definition of a qualified disability expense. It has to be for the person with a disability. So this isn't money gifted away for other people, right? It's a tax advantage program to support the needs of the person with a disability. So for the person with a disability, and to help improve or maintain the health, independence, or quality of life. Now, Ellyn has told me over the last 2 days that we've been in different meetings that her favorite word is maintain. Because it's not always about taking somebody to the next level. It's about, I want the same quality of life that I've become accustomed to, and I want to continue that quality of life, but I need money to do that. So think about a child that has been supported by their parents, and a lot of times a child who's an adult child may still live with their parents until well into their adult years. And we know that some parents have maintained that oversight of their adult child with a disability until the parents are into their 80s and beyond, right? So the child with a disability may be 50, 60 years old, still living at home with their parents. But the parents, I guarantee, well, I can't guarantee, usually are going to pass away before their child. It used to be that people with disabilities didn't outlive their parents. Now people with disabilities are much more commonly outliving their parents. So the parents say, well, I don't want my child's life, their quality of life, to change just because I'm gone. So it's about maintaining the quality of life of that child. But when they're gone, they now have this pot of money that's going to pay for the things that mom and dad were paying for when they were alive. Right? That could be the primary use of the stable account. So qualified disability expenses, these are categories out of the federal legislation. These are not intended to be exclusive categories. These are just examples. So housing and rent, basic living expenses, which I'm happy to report also includes food, and some basic living expenses. Transportation, education, technology, financial management, which is good, and legal fees because it can pay for things like setting up a special needs trust. Could actually be funded, the cost of doing that, out of the stable account. Health and wellness, and then my favorite phrase at the bottom, and many more. Because it just has to help improve or maintain the health, independence, or quality of life. Now, we have no magic hidden list that's all of the yeses and all of the nos. Because again, it has to be for the person with a disability and help to improve or maintain health, independence, or quality of life. So I always get the questions of families who are trying to push it. They're like, will it pay for this? Will it pay for that? And let me give you examples of what I mean by push it. I mean, medical or marijuana, right? And Disney World. Now, I don't know if that's at the same time or separate. but they always try to come up with the examples of what can I buy with this? And we haven't really been able to find anything that's, you can't buy that if they can justify it. So I had one family or one father come up to me and said, can I buy music CDs for my son? Being the good public servant that I am, I didn't give him a yes or no answer. I said, can you justify it? And he said, my son has autism. His provider takes him into the community on trips, and they go shopping for the music. They go to music stores. They go to music events. His music calms him, and he talks about his music with all his friends and family. Easily justified. Right? So you don't see music CDs on this list, but you see how he knows that it's for his son and how it helps his son maintain or improve the health, independence, or quality of life. So that's always what I'm going to go back to is how do you justify it as health, independence, or quality of life? Now, I know people can get very creative in that, and that's okay. Let me stop here and say, here's how this will be audited. So who's going to audit this? This is a tax advantage program administered by the IRS, so it would be an IRS audit. Now, To date, there has been no IRS audit of an ABLE account in the entire nation. It will happen, I guarantee you. The chance of being audited by the IRS because of having a stable account is no greater because you have it than if you didn't have it. If you got audited by the IRS and you had an ABLE account, they're going to look at that account and make sure you're using that account correctly. So you would be justifying to, during an IRS audit, this is a qualified disability expense. Now for Social Security and Medicaid, they're going to ask, does the individual have an account? Your answer if they have an account is yes. When did they open it? And how much is in it? And you can report all of those things. Then their responsibility is to go, thank you, set it to the side because they can't count it as a resource and move on. They can ask one other question. They can say, was it used on qualified disability expenses? And the instruction to both Social Security and Medicaid offices is to accept the testimony of the beneficiary. So if the person says, yes, it's been used on qualified disability expenses, they move on. Now, I don't know anybody that's going to say, no, I didn't use mine on qualified disability expenses. Now, that could happen, and I encourage people to be honest. But it's not the responsibility of Social Security or Medicaid to audit it at a transactional line item basis. Nowhere is it giving them authority to do that. They're simply looking to see if individuals have these accounts, how much is in the account, and then discard that amount and not count it towards the accountable resources.
On to the next slide, paying for somebody's, who's on SSI, paying for their housing and food, impacts their benefits in the same way.
So let's talk about that right now. It is in a slide, but it's later on, and I can bring it up now and make you feel good that we answered. No, this is an appropriate point. So the point that's brought up is that paying for housing and paying for food is what's called an in-kind support and maintenance. So you can, if you're paying for those things, you're going to reduce their public benefit. So let's say that they're on SSI and mom and dad are paying for food or paying for housing. Their SSI benefit is going to be reduced. It's going to be reduced by 1/3, which is a substantial amount. SSI this year is $771, I think it is. So reduced by 1/3, that's quite a bit of a reduction. So if you were to put, if mom and dad were to put the money into the stable account, then use the stable account to pay for food and housing. I work for a state treasurer's office, so I'm very careful when I say this. Some would call that money laundering. But it's a legal way of actually utilizing this tool to maximize benefits because it's allowable. It's no longer considered in-kind support and maintenance. I saw the light bulb just go off in your head, didn't I? You're like, that's the way to go. SSI goes back up to the maximum amount. It's a qualified disability expense, food and housing out of the stable account. SSI money in the stable account is now stable account funds. So you're totally allowed to do that. One step further, a special needs trust. So I'll go ahead and let that cat out of the bag as well. A special needs trust does not pay for food and housing because that would be considered in-kind support and maintenance and reduce public benefits. If a special needs trust does a distribution from the trust into the stable account, the stable account is the spending vehicle, is now using stable account funds. It's no longer special needs trust funds. It's ABLE account funds. It can purchase food and housing, and your special needs trust just became much more valuable because it can be used on food and housing through the stable account. That's a great way to use two tools together. So when you're doing special needs planning with families, I oftentimes get the question, which do I need, a special needs trust or a stable account? My answer is yes. Right? Because it really depends on what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, sometimes if you're talking about smaller amounts of money, if you're talking about first-party money, maybe a stable account is all that you need. Because for money less than $15,000, you can probably get rid of a need for a first-party trust. Now, for money over $15,000, if it's first-party money, you're still going to need a first-party trust. But you could potentially get rid of first-party trust and use just the stable account. For third-party money, special needs trust is a great place to keep it. But then to use this as the spending vehicle so that the trustee isn't constantly having the beneficiary come to them and say, I want to make another purchase. Can you release another distribution for X number of dollars? And it has to be the exact amount of dollars, and you have to have receipts and track. You can just make a distribution into the stable account and let the stable account be the tool used to spend the funds that were in the special needs trust. So those two tools working together are great. So there's several different ways of spending out of the stable account. First one is to take money from the stable account, transfer it back to a checking or savings account, the regular spending account that the person has, then they spend it out of the checking or savings. I'll be honest with you, I don't like that way because it commingles funds. Because the record keeping stops when it hits the checking or savings account. And the next ways of spending, the record keeping is completely maintained within the stable account program. So the next way is to pay with a third-party check. So you log on to your stable account, you say, I want to make this payment. We'll use a landlord as an example. I want to pay my rent. Tell us who the landlord is, what the rent amount is, and we make the payment directly to the landlord. We can do it electronically, we can send a check, but it cuts out a middleman. You don't have to send it to the provider who then gives it to the landlord. You don't have to give it to a family member or the person with a disability. It goes right to the landlord. And that's a great way to make a direct payment. Once you create the third party in the stable account, that third party information is maintained there. So next month when you go in to make that same payment, you just click on it and say pay again. So it's that easy. Now you do have to manually do that. We don't have a recurring payment system. And we did that intentionally. We get some resistance on that. People say, oh, I wish it was automated so I didn't have to do that. We want people to know their balance in their account. We want them to make sure that there's enough funds in there and manage the account in some way. And we're helping them on their budgeting. So many times people who have this much money have never had this much money before. And yes, we're going to make sure that they are understanding how much they have and how it's being used. So right now it's still a manual process. You have to go in and make that payment to the third party.
So they don't actually have a checkbook of their own.
They do not have an actual checkbook. Nope. Now the next way, they do have a piece in hand, and that's called the stable card. So the stable card is a loadable debit card. The stable card has their name on it, which is very empowering because that might be the first card that they have with their own name on it. Because maybe they don't have a checking account with a debit card attached to it because of the liabilities of spending everything out of it. The stable card being a loadable debit card means that you have to log on to your stable account, then transfer funds from the stable account onto the card, and that's all the card is worth, only when you transfer it onto it. So this serves many different purposes. Think of first a parent with a child with a disability. So they want to give the child some money to go spend, but maybe the account has $10,000 in it. They don't want to give the child a card that has a $10,000 balance on it, right? They want to give the child maybe $100 to go out and go shopping. Well, they can load $100 on the card. Once they spend the $100, the card can't spend anymore until the card has been reloaded with funds. So parents maintain control. Think about a provider who's providing money management to that person with a disability. So they're overseeing the finances of that person. But they want to give an allowance or an amount to that person to go spend. Same thing. They load the card, go spend it. You can't spend any more than that. So it serves many purposes. The person with a disability who's managing their own account, they can load as much as they want. Right? Then they can go spend off of that card and reload it as needed. So we believe that this was the best safeguard and best way to be able to spend money from it. There's no cash access to it. You can't go to an ATM machine, put it in and get cash back. So it's going to maintain all records of every purchase made from it. There's no overdrafting. The other benefit of this card, is anybody familiar with the TrueLink card? It's very common in special needs trust. This is a TrueLink card. So we partnered with TrueLink. TrueLink's ability to manage the card is phenomenal. It's the best out there. You can zero in right down to a store location on turning on and off spending features. So I always use the example because I've helped people with disabilities who are in this circumstance. Maybe you have somebody that has diabetes, but they still like to go to the local gas station on the corner. They walk from their house down to the gas station and get a 140-ounce Mountain Dew. Right? We know for health reasons that's not a good thing. But we can't stop them from going down to the gas station and purchasing it unless we just say on the TrueLink card, it can't be used at that store. And then they can't spend it there. That's how detailed the controls can be. Now, I'm very sensitive to the rights of a person with a disability. They have the rights to make mistakes just like you and I do, to make poor decisions just like you and I do. So I'm not saying that this should violate rights, but I'm saying that sometimes controls are needed, and this has all of the ability to have controls built into the card. So you can control how much it is controlled or is not controlled based on the dashboard that controls the treatment card. So supplemental security income, SSI, is a social security program that is for food and housing. That's the whole reason why SSI exists. It's for individuals who can't afford food and housing to have public assistance in affording those things. Social Security said if an ABLE account reaches $100,000, their SSI is going to be suspended. Now, I've had some people say, I can't believe they're putting that limit on us. And again, it makes me laugh because I'm like, it's $100,000. And if you have that much money, you don't need the assistance of SSI. You have enough for food and housing. You've accomplished your goal of financial independence. If you spend that account down and it goes back below $100,000, your SSI will be reinstated because you still qualify for it. It was just that you're now over-resourced for it if your account goes over $100,000. We haven't had anybody hit that because annual contribution limits haven't let anybody get to that place yet. It'll only be in the next year to 2 years that we're going to have people start to hit that. And it'll be interesting to work with Social Security to see how quickly they respond to turning that on and off, suspending it and unsuspending it. I like to believe that it's going to be quick and easy, but I've also worked with Social Security all my life, so I don't know how that's going to be done yet, but we are very hopeful that it'll work closely with us. Also, for whatever reason, Social Security built in this one other goofy rule. I can call it goofy because I don't work for Social Security, but the rule is that if you take money out for housing, let's say you take it out to pay your rent, you have to pay that the same money you took it out of the ABLE account. Otherwise, if you're holding on to it till the next calendar month, holding on to it is now counted as a resource. Don't ask me why they did that. It's just a confusing rule. It hasn't affected anybody yet. It hasn't become an issue for anybody, but we like to fully disclose all of the rules that are out here on the use of ABLE accounts. That is one of them. And then the other thing that we'd like to point out, and I pointed this out in the very beginning, SSI is based on income and assets, eligibility for it. This does not reduce countable income. Some people say, well, can I put my work money directly in the stable? The answer is yes, but it's not going to reduce your countable income. It's a place to save your work money, but you're not reducing countable income. So countable income still counts as countable income. If the account holder passes away, the estate administrator notifies Oklahoma Stable, which is all one and the same as Ohio. So you're going to be notifying our program, and we freeze that account so that no other spending can happen until we know who the executor of the estate is. So somebody has to show that they're now executor of the estate and that they can access the funds here, and then the funds can be used. Here's how the funds are used. First of all, it can pay for any outstanding qualified disability expenses, including funeral and burial. After that, Medicaid can recover from this account. So Medicaid recovery exists outside of ABLE account. We didn't create this rule. It's just that now there's an estate for Medicaid to look to, so we want some money back. So unlike a third-party trust, which is not Medicaid recoverable because it was never the person's money, right? It's third-party money. This is like a first-party trust in that it is the person's money and it is recoverable. Except more protection than the first-party trust, you can pay for all qualified disability expenses that are outstanding, including funeral and burial. So we've had families and parents argue, you know, I get it. Medicaid can have whatever money is left in there because my son, my daughter, they received a lot of Medicaid services. So let Medicaid take back what's in there. We've had other family members say, Medicaid isn't getting a dime of my money. Right? I'm not going to make an argument for which side you should be on. The families that say Medicaid isn't going to get a dime of my money usually say, my son or daughter, they're going to have the best funeral ever. They're just going to exhaust the stable account on the funeral and burial expenses. That's allowable. You can actually do that. But Medicaid can recover out of this account. Yes, we've worked through that. We've had people die that had stable accounts. What we do is we work through that executive of the estate to get something from Medicaid saying how much Medicaid is asking for. We look to make sure that that makes sense. In one case, Medicaid asked for a whole bunch of money back. What we realized is they asked for all the value of all Medicaid services of that person's life. The person hadn't received any Medicaid services since the date the account was opened, and so they actually didn't owe anything because it's only the amount of Medicaid services from the date the account is open forward. So a first-party trust can recover or Medicaid can recover out of a first party trust the value of Medicaid services out of all of that person's life. Stable account is only from the date the account was opened forward. It's another benefit to the stable account over a first party trust.
Is Medicaid recovery limited to the probate process? Or can there be recovery similar to a special needs trust where they go to the trustee and say, you owe us?
No, it would be just through the probate. They can't go beyond that because we're talking about just the estate of the person with a disability, and this is part of that estate.
Okay.
So they can't go beyond that.
A lot of people get hung up on this stuff.
Yes.
They start to worry. I've had clients that worry about it, and the amount that they pay into Medicaid, since it's smaller, they keep thinking about big amounts of money. I don't want to put it in there. I don't want to open it up against the problem, but it is very small compared to the benefits that they receive. So people get hung up on that, and there's other ways to work with that as well.
Yeah, so we want to be completely transparent and say Medicaid can recover out of this. And I think that we owe it to each person who's considering this to fully understand that. But we also want to talk through what their feelings are about that and explain that, you know, the value of your Medicaid services that you didn't pay for compared to what is in your account, what the account can be used for after death. You really have to consider this has a lot of value to it. So.
What about the legal fees for the probate?
It's fees that are incurred prior to death. So unfortunately, those probate fees are going to hit after death. Now, except for funeral and burial, because obviously that's after the person has passed away. Those can still be paid for, but not any other fees beyond that. Yeah, I wish that the answer was different.
And you said there's no beneficiary designation on this account?
It goes, the remainder of the account, so if there was anything remaining after all qualified disability expenses, after funeral and burial, and after Medicaid recovery, there could still be a balance of that goes through the probate process or a will. So there's not a transfer on death, but it's going to go through whatever designations are there, either by their own will that they've created or through the probate process.
Are there any protections for, like, after someone passes away, there's typically protections from the time of an actual executive gets status for the account? So someone passes away, they may not be administrated until
Well, so we freeze the account until that executor estate is there, and we also then don't release any funds until we get something from Medicaid saying that there is or is not a lien on the account. So really, those are the only two things that we're looking to make sure are accomplished. And if both of those things have been taken care of, then we can release the fund back. Yeah, there should, the answer is yes. Sometimes though, in working with an executor, we kind of push the trigger a little bit, because eventually Medicaid is going to know that person passed away. You would think that that would be pretty quick, but sometimes that can be a while. So we proactively request that information from Medicaid if they're going to seek any recovery.
So this is something about how do they even know that this person's passed away? Is there any way that
Only somebody notifying us. Yep.
All standing bills have to be paid through probate. It's not something we pay after death.
All qualified if an executor of the estate is in place and there are qualified disability expenses to be paid, it does not have to go through probate for this to be the funding source of maintenance.
Have an executor in place, you got to go probate.
Yes, that would be true. Yes, so the executor of the estate, those who are working with on that.
Particularly as these accounts grow and has a probate court determined whether or not those assets that are in this account are part of the estate for purposes of the PR fee calculation and that kind of thing, or are we not that deep into it yet? I would think they would be excludable by a probate court, because if you can't pay the personal representative out of there, why would you include it as an asset of the estate?
That's a good question, and I'm going to be honest, we haven't had that, so that'll be something to follow up on. I see Ellyn taking a note down, not that I'm counting on her for feedback from here, but I want to get you some answers to that, so we'll look and see what we can get on there. We've had, I think it's 13 individuals so far that have passed away that have a stable account.
In Oklahoma?
No, total,
Oh,
out of all the stable account beneficiaries that we have, which is right around 14,000 accounts that we have right now. Only 13 guys work through. Yeah. Now it's going to continue to grow, obviously, over time. The one certainty, right? There is an account cost. It's a very low cost. We're very transparent about that. $3.50 per month is the account maintenance fees. And then asset-based fees, these are investment fees between 0.19 and 0.33%. And I love when there's somebody who understands investments in there so that I don't have to say those are very low fees. They're like, yeah, those are very low fees. 0.19, 0.33%. That goes back to the Vanguard and why we use Vanguard, the institutional class fees that we have. They're very low. So if you're doing comparisons, because I'll be honest, Oklahoma Stable is not the only plan available to Oklahomans. Just like a 529 college savings account, they wouldn't have to choose Oklahoma's college savings account to participate in. But there's incentives to do that, and there's reasons why people do it because they trust their own state and the administration that they can contact locally. But they could look to a national ABLE program other than the stable account program that exists, and they might find fees as low as $3 a month. But then they're going to also pay for a debit card. And it won't be a loadable debit card. It'll be a different type, like a checking account balance, where they have access to the full balance of the card. They don't have the same award-winning customer service. So there's stock features to the plan that you have to consider. The largest would be that the Oklahoma Stable program is an in-state plan where you have local administration, and you can contact that local administration with questions. You can contact for information. You know, somebody to come out and present information to an attorney group, to a parent group. So we're working with the treasurer's office on more and more what that looks like and the outreach, but they're very responsive to, if you have a need, they will find somebody. Ellyn is somebody who comes out and talks about it as an ambassador of the program also, but we're constantly looking to continue to put more resources towards that, the best way to handle that. Another great way to handle that is that because you've been here, you're going to be talking to people. You now know about this program. And so just exponentially, if you each go out and talk with a family or another attorney colleague that you have, they're now going to know about it as well. So it really just comes from word of mouth and continuing to use it and see it spread. But $3.50 is not the highest costing ABLE program. It's not the lowest costing. I actually like that because I think you should throw those two out to start with and go with the middle anyway. But we offer the best that you can get for $3.50. Yes, I have a biased opinion, but hopefully you've understood all the features of that today as well. So special needs trust. I'm going to go just a little bit more into this. I know I talked about it quite a bit earlier. First of all, if an individual has a special needs trust, and they would like for that trust to be able to make distributions into an ABLE account, you no longer have to amend the trust. In the very beginning, you had to because there was nothing in place that said that that was allowable. Now it is allowable. It's clearly defined as an allowable distribution. So you can make a distribution from a special needs trust into a stable account. Once the funds hit the stable account, you no longer have to be concerned with those funds because now they're ABLE account funds. They're not special needs trust funds. So now they're under all of the guidance of ABLE account, not trust. We have had attorneys say though, I'm still not comfortable with that because they want to make sure that it's still for the sole benefit of the person since it's trust funds going into the ABLE account, so they want an extra layer of protection. You can contact us. I can send you a form. We call it an informed consent form saying that yes, we know that the money that you're taking from my trust and putting in my ABLE account has to be used according to ABLE account rules. So we have that already drafted. If some attorneys say, yeah, I'd like to have my client sign that just in case, we can provide that to you. If you'd like to explain what ABLE accounts are to your clientele, we actually have a letter that does that as well. That says that you have a special needs trust with us. You can put your company's name in there. If you'd like to add on a stable account so that you have better spending ability, we'll partner with Oklahoma Stable. You can open a stable account and we'll make distributions into it. So it explains that in the letter. We can give that to you. But really what that allows is that broader spending power, because you can now use it for food and housing. It provides more access to the funds because they're not constantly coming back to the trustee and asking for it. And really it's about the stable account, the biggest difference, being an account that is owned and administered by the person with the disability, where a trust is administered by the trustee, right? It's for the benefit of the person with the disability, but it's not their money. So those are the big differences in it. There are some other fees and tax differences in that, but the real difference is how are they using it? And does this make sense to use as a tool with the special needs trust? Now, before we get to this, I'll leave this slide up as the last slide. I want to talk about just some other uses of ABLE accounts. Let me talk about the slide first. So our 1-800 number, I really like it because when you call a 1-800 number, somebody picks up the phone and says hello. That's unique for a government program, but we're very proud of our customer service. Our customer service staff cannot be employed as a customer service staff unless they have experience working with people with disabilities. So they understand that a telephone call may be a more challenging call. It may be a longer call. It may take repeating things or saying in different ways that the person understands. But we've gotten awards from national disability groups on our customer service. We're very happy with the way we provide that. We will follow up, just like I said, we follow up to Tony's question about probate and that. We'll follow up. We're very proud of our follow-up on that. A lot of times, if our customer service staff can't answer a call or answer a question for somebody, it escalates. And sometimes I'm the one calling somebody back, which I actually find is a great part of my job. I love talking to families that are using this. We do have our email address also, which you're welcome to jot that down. Now, this presentation that I went over today is available on the Oklahoma Stable website. So this is available to you. You can pull it up. You can review back over it. You can show it to your staff. You can give it to your clients. It's a great presentation. It does help to have a voice to it. So the presentation on its own is just a bunch of slides with good information. But hopefully you've gained a deeper understanding of it from today's time that we've been able to spend together. But there are a lot of resources on the website. There's electronic flyers on the website. There's a fact sheet, which Ellyn has printed out, and we have here for you today, just a basic one-page fact sheet giving it an overview of what this is. There's Spanish translated materials on there. We don't have every language, but we did try to accommodate at least the Spanish population, the speaking population also. So we've got that on there. But okstable.org, that is the website for you to go to get all of that information. So a couple other areas to kind of keep in mind on scenarios where this can be useful. If you think about a person who's working and they have those earned wages, what's the number one way that a person saves money? The number one way is that they save it automatically, right? If they're required for that paycheck to first go into their checking account, and then from their checking account, they put it into a long-term savings account, being a retirement account or a stable account, their chances of saving are much lower. That would be the same for me. That's not too unique for people with disabilities. If I have money in my checking account, I want to spend it. That's why my retirement account is automatically deducted from my paycheck before I have access to spend it. That's what keeps me growing that retirement account. We have the ability for people to directly deposit from a paycheck into the Oklahoma Stable. That serves two different big purposes. One would be a person with a disability who's working, putting their own money directly in. Saying, I want to save for long-term purposes, and I want to do that intentionally through a direct deposit. The other would be for a parent. Think about 529 college savings account. As a parent saving for their child to go to college, they need to be directly doing that through a payroll contribution. They can now do this to a stable account directly. Because the stable account has an account and a routing number, all they have to do is give that to their HR or payroll system, and just like any other additional account that you're having part of your paycheck put into, this is put into your payroll system, and part of the money goes directly into stable. So this is not a retirement account. It's not legislated as a retirement account. But think about the purpose of it being used for long-term savings. I'll use the word like a retirement account. Because a person with a disability, if they have a 401k and they stop working, that 401k is now a accountable resource. So all the time that they spent building that up, thinking that they were preparing for the future and doing well, that balloon just burst, and that money has to be spent or protected another way, but it's going to be penalized because they're taking it out early. So we've had people take out of their 401k, people with disabilities, and put it into their stable account, but they experienced the penalty on it when they did that.
That was my question. Do they are there any rollover provisions?
Not yet. We're working on that as well. We'd love to see that as a federal legislation. There is the ability to roll over though, which is a great segue, so thank you, a 529 college savings account into the Oklahoma stable account. So families with a child.
Still have the limits?
It is beholden to the annual contribution limit. So if you have a large college savings account, you might have to do it over a couple of years. We've had some do the full amount of $15,000 each year. We've had others put in less if they could put in other money also. But yes, it's beholden to that 15,000.
And the current limit on the 529 account, the one that's called checking account, is
So if they had a fully funded Oklahoma college savings account, did you say 300? It would take many years to roll it over. Think about a child with a disability and the parents don't know whether that child's going to go to college or not. So they have a choice. Do I want to do a college savings account or a stable account or both? They could actually take the unused funds from the college savings account if the child doesn't go to college and put it into a stable account and now have the ability to spend it on that broad range of everything without getting penalized for taking it out of the college savings account. There is a tremendous use for that rollover, and we're seeing a lot of families take advantage of that.
Did you say those payroll earnings that are directly deducted are tax advantage for both federal and state?
They are post-tax money
Okay.
that's going in there. So the only tax advantage on
Is the
you
growth.
is the growth.
Okay.
Yep. For now.
I may have mentioned this, but what about creditors' claims and bankruptcy? Are these protected assets or are these reachable?
So in our plan, to get technical, if one of the technical plans, our plan disclosure has a section exactly about that. So what I'll say is there is some protections in place. There's some ability to still come into this account and be able to collect, but not very much. It is very well protected from that, but in some legal cases, they could come to this as an asset of the person, a resource of the person, and request funds back out. It would have to go through a legal process to get that. We're not just going to release funds, and it would have to come through the person making that, or through the courts somehow for that. We aren't just going to respond to the creditor contact. Good questions. Any other questions? So did you learn anything today that you can take away from this? Hopefully you learned that it exists, right? That's the number one thing. You probably have heard about it, but to know more about it and say, this is real, this is useful, this has a purpose and a reason why we want to know about it. A lot of people in special needs planning area have found that this is even more valuable to them because of this. If you're helping a family that has a disability within their family, a child with a disability, and you can provide one more useful tool to them, you've just expanded your value to them, and they are going to love that they now have this knowledge. Are you going to make, you aren't selling this to them. You aren't going to make a commission off of this. I wish I could say that every one that you signed up, I could give you a commission. It's not going to happen. You're going to gain from it because they're going to now understand also that they need a special needs trust for that third party, generational wealth. You're going to expand on this because they see you as a resource in their life, that you just became more valuable to them by telling them about this. This is a useful tool that they're going to appreciate knowing about.
The age 26, I can see as a highly limited tax. Is there any talk or discussion about moving that?
Yeah, so the bill is on Capitol Hill. I mentioned that quickly earlier, and we are seeking, continued support from state legislators to push that through at the federal level. We don't know whether that's going to happen. I mean, anything in today's climate is difficult to predict whether that's going to go through. It's got more co-sponsors than any other bill out there, so we do have a lot of support for it, but whether it's going to go through is yet to be determined.
They're a little preoccupied.
Well, it would change it from the age 26 to the age 46. Yeah, the CBO score, so the score that says what's it going to cost the nation to have this, was tremendously miscalculated. And so it hasn't cost the federal government, by loss of tax revenue, nearly as much as they thought it was going to cost. Rescoring it is the problem, is getting them to do a score based on 3 years of use to make a more accurate prediction on what those lost tax revenues are. So that's kind of where it's stuck right now, is getting a new CBO score.
Just for curiosity, do you know how much has been set aside in the 15 years, or excuse me, 5 years?
Well, 3.5 since the first account opened.
Okay.
And that was Ohio. So we have about 14,000 accounts in stable. So that's not the other ABLE programs. I'll get there in just a minute. We just crossed over $100 million in contributions. So to me, again, with my background in serving people with disabilities, that's exciting because I started today talking about Larry and spending Larry's money when we went out together. That's $100 million that didn't have to be wasted, right? It wasn't spent now. So in the disability world, you may or may not know this, the word retarded has been eliminated from the vocabulary of the disability community because it was a vulgar word. It was misused, and so we got rid of the R word, retarded. I think we ought to get rid of the S word, spend that, because I think it's just as bad. I mean, it shouldn't exist. You have money, and to keep your public benefits, you spend it down. That makes no sense to anybody, to the taxpayer, to the federal government. It doesn't make any sense. So I think we ought to eliminate the word spend down. Tim, I'm going to ask if you know what the federal number was. We were just looking at that yesterday. The total amount that's been contributed to ABLE accounts.
Oh, God.
It's right around, I want to say, 250 to 300 million. We have about a third of the market.
I know that the market share for stable is 22%. So.
Yeah, maybe even a little higher contribution.
Maybe close
Yeah.
Close to 500. Right.
So that's national.
Right. More than 400.
I just did a rough fee calculation. That's also $2.5 million in fees paid to somebody.
Based on $3.50 a month.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking
42 a year plus
Well, and
25 basis points on average. But I mean, and again, that's just, because somebody is going to be skeptical and say, this is just going to cost me more money. And I heard a great line from a real estate auction guy for some land I sold in trust in Kiowa County. And he said, I'm not going to charge you. I'm going to pay you to sell the money or to sell the land. And what he was saying was, yeah, I'm going to pay him a 4% commission, but I'm going to increase the market price and the sales price so high that you're going to get more than what you're going to pay me than you are if you try to sell it yourself. And so just.
Well, so to Tony's point, that's a fair point because, there are some financial accounts that you could potentially have for free, checking and savings accounts. Many of them have some sort of fees on there, especially if you actually get hard copy checks or you have the ability to spend from it. If there's fees attached. So it's not much different than other financial accounts. But here's what I'll say. When we started, we had a $5 a month fee. And because we've reached economies of scale where we could reduce that, we reduced it down to $3.50. If we were in it for profit, we would have just kept it at $5 because people were already paying that to get what they were getting from us.
See, but the benefit outweighs that. And as a parent, I just want that word maintain is so important because I used to be in the DW, we call it the disability world, and I worked for a nonprofit. And to see family members and to go and visit and monitor homes and cottages and institution like in places, my son, I don't want him to live there. So that maintain and the amount of money you get with benefits, we put him in those places and not give him the same lifestyle that he's having with me. We're not rich or anything like that, but his food choices are different than the spaghetti they would serve nightly at that. So it's just that benefits me, I'll pay it. And then it's also being in the disability world. I want my son to be treated like a typical person like us. We call you guys and me that don't have a disability tippies, but well, that's just a bad word that we use just because they've used other words for my son, but as a non-disabled person, I want him to be in that world. And by paying fees, he's put in that world. It's not about us taking his money. It's about him living in this world because we're opening up those doors for him. So that's the way I want to look at it. Not that, oh, we're taking their money. No, they're getting a gain like all of us non-disabled are. So why should they pay fees? That's how I look at it.
Fee-wise, and I'm just thinking through arguments, and I just came out of a corporate trusteeship and investment environment, all right? So fees and those kinds of things are a common discussion. And people get penny wise and pound foolish about it. If you do the math, it's about 84 basis points, which is pretty good.
It's the attitudes that are the hardest to change.
Yeah.
Those are the hardest.
So, I mean, I'm just thinking through for those that will work on that, you know, when someone may grouse about the fees, to say, don't worry about the fees, that you're being very myopic in your view that you're worried about what fees you're paying.
And the other response that you can give is, okay, you don't have to have a stable account. You can stay with your $2,000 resource limitation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the alternative, right? Is you can never have more than $2,000. And I wouldn't, be so flippant with a person in my initial response to them, unless I got pushed back really hard, then I can become sarcastic and flippant. But we would have fun with it to say, this is an ability to save, even if you look at the SSI amount, the $100,000 limit, like you never had that ability before. Now you can save that much money, invest it tax-free. So if you're investing it, you can offset your fees, potentially more so than the fees themselves, depending on your account balance and how much you're investing.
I had a question with regards to the 468,000 lifetime value.
Huh?
Does that mean, so you hit 468,000, you can't go over that at one time, but if you.
You can't, so when it hits 460, I think I know where you're going. See if I answer your question. When you hit $468,000, again, who's going to hit that? That's going to be the outlier situation. Well, let's say that you get there. You can't contribute any more funds until the balance would come back down. So if you spent it down, you could contribute more funds. But the interest being earned, so if you had that money invested, it was gaining interest, can still go above and beyond the $468,000. You just can't contribute anymore.
So if you're, let's say, we're not, and I'm thinking about it in terms of, I know you can only spend $15,000 a year, but I'm looking at it as, what if a grandparent or a parent wants to leave money when they pass to an accomplished child? They can only still fund it at $15,000 a year.
I would say a third-party special needs trust, which would be the tool that's used. And we're very clear about that, and that's why trust attorneys have said, yeah, we want to work together, because there's a place for the special needs trust that it makes sense that's not us. And so we want to guide families to the right tool. And special needs trust for passing on generational wealth, or a life insurance policy, or a house, or whatever else that's not, special needs trust has that place.
But, okay, if I'm at $15,000 a year, how many years does it take to get up to 468?
A lot of years.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. One other quick thing, I talked about the direct deposit of a payroll check into it. Kind of cool. We hope to work on this in Oklahoma as well. Employers are now doing what we would call a match contribution, just like they do in the 401k, in the stable account. So we've got examples now of companies that said we want to treat our employees with disabilities the same as we treat our employees without disabilities. So if they are treating their employees without disabilities by matching a 401k, and a person with a disability says, I'm not going to do a 401k because that's going to be a accountable resource when I stop working. So I'm going to do a stable account. The employer says, okay, I'll put my matching contribution into the stable account instead. And they're doing that because they want to treat their employees equally. Now, what we're working on the federal side, since we talked about federal improvements, is to incentivize it the same way that retirement matching contributions are for an employer. And we hope to get that federal legislation in place as well, to allow employers to receive the same benefit for a contribution into a stable account as they would into a 401k. So that's a really cool thing. So if you know companies, you say, I've got the perfect company, or I know a person with a disability who works at this company, and that company would really like to do it. Please know that we'll work with that company. So through the state treasurer's office here and working with the Ohio team, we'll work to make sure that that company knows the few easy steps that it takes. It's not hard to accomplish that, so that they can make direct deposits into it. So we've got some materials that focus that way. We have a news story that was a really awesome news story of the first company that did that in the nation. And I celebrate what they did because they saw the vision of it, just that we want to treat our employees equally. Those are employers who get it, and they value the workforce of people with disabilities. So please let us know if those exist also. Ellyn, do you have anything else to add? Someone close with a story on the story?
No, we do have some evaluations, just we'd like to do this again. So if you would fill those out, please. That's all.
So I'll leave you with this story. I have a friend of mine who lives in our hometown. He works at the local hardware store. He's an individual with a disability. And he came to me and said, Doug, I opened up a stable account. He was really excited about it. He knew I worked for the program, so he was excited to tell me. I said, that's awesome. I said, will you tell me how much you put into it when you first started? Because we have a trust relationship. You would be open with that personal information. And he said, I put $6,000 in it when I opened. And I said, where did you have $6,000? Because I know you have Medicaid. What were you doing with $6,000? I said, where did you put it? He said, that $6,000 was under my bed mattress. Because he had to have public benefits to support his life, but he didn't want to spend down his $6,000. So the only thing he knew how to do, now I didn't congratulate him, right? Not for what he had been doing, but for what he did by opening up a stable account. But for him, he's got a safe place to keep the money. He can use it to grow it for the future. And it's protected the way that able accounts are intended to protect the funds. So that is the story that I want to leave you with, to say that this has a purpose, whether it's first-party money, third-party money. It makes sense. It fits into all the tools that are able to support a person with a disability. There's many tools out there. We don't want to confuse people, but they should know that this exists, and you can be a part of helping them do that. So thank you for attending today. Please fill out a survey, and I'm also happy that you were able to get your CLEs today. Also, who showed up, thank you. One more thing, State Treasurer, McDaniel, if you'd like to just give away, is here with us today, so he came to administrating the program locally, so we are very happy to partner not just with Tim and his staff, but also with the State Treasurer himself. So thank you, everybody.